Gordon Chang, what are the goals of North Korea in the region? What does North Korea get by coming and secretly arming Syria?
Well, North Korea gets customers, and therefore it gets revenue streams, which are very important to a regime which has very little in the way of legitimate income. I mean, when you add this, it's like other things like cigarette smuggling, which perhaps is not quite so bad as selling dangerous technologies. But clearly, North Korea has been selling nuclear technologies and also missiles and missile parts. You know, in April 2003, a North Korean diplomat told one of ours in Beijing that his country reserved the right to sell nuclear weapons. And I don't think we really understood the significance of that statement at the moment. But, you know, in considering what's happened in September of last year, where it was clear that North Koreans were building a reactor for Syria, now we know really what the meaning of that statement is. And we can expect more proliferation from North Korea unless we raise the cost. And so far, we haven't done that.
Lon Berman, what's to stop North Korea at this point from arming any number of nations that may not have good intentions?
Well, I think that's a great question because over the last several years, we've seen very concretely, very definitively, that North Korean WMD know-how and ballistic missile know-how has migrated over to populate the arsenals of countries like Syria, countries like Iran. Iran's the mainstay of the Iranian ballistic missile arsenal is a missile called the Shahab-3. It's a reverse-engineered no-dong missile of North Korean origin. So North Korea's knowledge is everyone's gain. And so what's emerging, essentially, is that when you talk about nuclear proliferation, you have to take a very top-down approach, a very holistic view, in which you see really a self-sustaining architecture, an architecture that's being fed by North Korea, by groups like the Abdul Qadir Khan Network in Pakistan, and others. But it's an architecture that is helping countries in the region that want to be weapon states, that want to present a challenge to the West, that want to expand their regional stature, helping them get technologies that during the decades of the Cold War they wouldn't be able to get. They wouldn't be able to get because they wouldn't have the money and they wouldn't have the patron to do so. Now things are different. Now you have countries like Syria, countries like Iran that are able and willing to acquire this technology, and it's making the Middle East and beyond a very dangerous place.
Well, what happens when countries like Syria and Iran do get their hands on nuclear weapons? What are they going to do with them?
Well, you know, the notion that it becomes a deterrent, I don't believe that this is the case. I believe Syria, as I mentioned earlier, has a lot sinister goals in the region, and I think eventually they will threaten to use those weapons against their neighbors. They will maneuver to show that their intent to use those weapons in order to extract concessions, in order to extract more power in the region, and in order to hegemonize the region according to the mullahs and according to the militant socialist government that we have in Syria. So I think it behooves us, it behooves the US, it behooves Syrians as well, to realize that Syria with a nuclear weapon would become a grave danger for the region, let alone if Iran gets the weapon. So I think we have to be careful of that, and by default we cannot allow this to happen. And yet we have not seen the move from this administration that would indicate they're going to put enough pressure on Syria to stop them from taking on another weapon or from building a nuclear weapon. I have to remind you very quickly that you know, Reagan in 1986, when Gaddafi was sponsoring terrorism, he bombed a disco in Berlin. Reagan responded, correct. Reagan responded by bombing Libya and hurting Gaddafi where it matters. And then after that, we saw Libya very tamed and very, very careful about what it does. And I believe that we should do the same with Syria. I believe that we should actually take the step to actually threaten Syria and threaten Iran to the point that they will realize that if they take those steps, major steps toward nuclearization, that the price they will pay will be too dear for them.
Gordon Chang?
You know, the perception that Syria is dangerous is not just shared by Israel, which bombed that site last September. Right. It's shared really by all the countries in the region. And the reason we know that is that after the bombing of the Syrian site, Syria's Arab neighbors didn't say anything.
Correct.
Or they said extremely little, the bare minimum. And I think that's an indication that the countries do believe that Syria's intent is indeed malign. This is no longer like an Israeli versus the rest of the region issue. This is the rest of the region being very concerned not only about Syria, but about Iran. And I think we should take our cue, really, from this.
Ilan Berman.
Well, I think this is exactly right, and it actually mirrors something that's happening further south in the Persian Gulf. You have, on the eve of Operation Iraqi Freedom in late 2002, you had one declared nuclear aspirant in the Persian Gulf, and it wasn't Iraq, it was Iran itself. Today, you have at least 11. You have Iran and the 6 countries of the GCC, and Turkey and Egypt and Yemen, and others that are coming down the pike. And so the timing isn't coincidental here. Countries in the region are very concerned about the nuclear capability of Iran, about what Iran's going to do if it gets this capability, and they're making other plans. And they're making other plans because they're concerned about what they have to throw at the Iranian threat, and also they're concerned about whether the United States will be there in the long term to protect them. And so this speaks volumes about what American policy in the region should be. First and foremost, American policy is concerned about non-proliferation, about preventing additional states from getting nuclear capability, getting WMD capability. We're facing a situation where if Iran, and to a lesser extent Syria, go nuclear, you're not going to be facing one additional nuclear power in the Middle East, you're going to be facing many, because countries are going to take their cues, they're going to say, we need a nuclear capability ourselves in response, or, like Syria, they're going to say, hey, the Iranians are acquiring this capability, the Americans aren't doing anything about it, this gives us the green light, the open door, to go through that door ourselves. And this is a very dangerous development, because if we're unable to contain one nuclear Iran, think about what it would look like to try to contain a nuclear arms race, including the one that's already developing in the Middle East. It speaks volumes about what it's going to look like for U.S. policy and American force posture in Iraq and elsewhere over the next several years.
Now, is an arms race, a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, necessarily more dangerous than a nuclear arms race elsewhere? The U.S. repeats its concern often that the problem with Iran acquiring nuclear weapons isn't just that it's one more country with nuclear weapons, but rather that there is something qualitatively different about a nation that is a sponsor of terrorism having at its disposal nuclear weapons that may then end up in the hands of terrorists. How real is that threat?
Well, it is a real threat, and I think you put your finger on it, Eric, here. Somebody brought up the issue, I think, brought up the issue of India, that we are helping India. Mr. Berman brought it up. There's a difference between a country that is peaceful, democratic, where the decision of using a nuclear weapon is based on a lot of people coming together to create the havoc that a nuclear weapon could create. But a nuclear weapon in the hands of a dictatorship, one dictator, one man, can actually push the button. That's where the danger lies. And I think that's where the difference is. And that's why we believe that countries like Iran, North Korea, Syria, countries who have that militant regime, who are capable of actually pushing that button, and who do not have a democracy where the leaders are accountable to their own people and accountable to the rest of the world, that's where the danger lies. And I think I agree with the two gentlemen here that we need, the U.S. administration has to take a much more aggressive stand on the issue of proliferation in the Middle East.